How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavtes? Yeah, Daf Chavtes of Masechta BavaBasra. Okay, Daf Chavtes. So we're kind of starting shtickle in the middle of a sugya. A little bit in the middle of a sugya. Still learning about how we know Chazaka. And then, what do we get up to? Okay. Okay. What's super interesting about Daf Chavtes of BavaBasra is that this is the changeover daf. And Daf Chavtes is when, towards the top of Chavtes Amud Aleph, Rashi ends. So Rashi ends. In our Gemara, where Rashi, and from now on, for the rest of Masechta BavaBasra, it's his grandson, the Rashbam. Now in our Gemara, where Rashi ends, says Ad kan perish Rashi zatzal, mikan ve'elech perish Rabbeinu Shmuel b'Reb Meir. Okay, so I don't exactly know what happened to Rashi on this. Maybe it got lost. I don't know. There's another girsa that says kan meis Rashi zal, that here Rashi passed away, which is interesting because, we have Rashi on Sanhedrin, we have Rashi on Makis and Shavuos. So, did Rashi do all the Masechtas and Shas and save BavaBasra for last? So I don't know exactly what that means, that he died in the middle. Maybe he saved BavaBasra for last. I don't know. It's the longest one. Well, it's only the longest one because the Rashbam takes over. But anyways, so Daf Chavtes is where Rashi ends from Masechta BavaBasra, and from this point on, it's the Rashbam. And so at this point, I've learned a few daf already with the Rashbam. I've learned maybe 4 daf already with the Rashbam. The Rashbam is certainly very verbose. That is for sure. Which has an interesting sort of hashlacha, thing about it, which is that there's actually much less Gemara on the dafs because there's so much commentary. There's not so much Gemara on the daf. So I suspect we're going to have a lot of very short episodes of Babylon Talmud in our future. And just my initial reflections on Rashi versus the Rashbam is, my sort of initial reflections are obviously, Rashi is extremely succinct, where Rashi would take a few words, the Rashbam would take a few lines, right? Certainly Rashi is a lot more succinct. But what I've also been finding is that, with Rashi, when I learn a daf, so far, I've only done a few dafs so far with the Rashbam, but when I learn a daf with Rashi, it's not like you could read Rashi and then you could just breeze through the Gemara because you basically know it already. You already learned Rashi, now you could just breeze through the Gemara. Rashi kind of gives you what you need to kind of go back and figure out the Gemara. So it's kind of you'll spend maybe 40% learning Rashi and 60% figuring out the Gemara. Rashi gives you what you need to then go back and figure out the Gemara yourself, but you're going to be spending a lot of time in the Gemara. What I've been finding with the Rashbam is it's 90% of the investment is in the Rashbam. There's just so much Rashbam. It's like a mountain of commentary. So, I find myself spending almost all of my time in the Rashbam, not even trying to figure out the Rashbam, because the Rashbam isn't that difficult. He just writes so much that, I spend most of my time just reading the Rashbam, which is a very good commentary. It almost feels like the art scroll. It's an excellent commentary, but very, very verbose. But once I find that once I get through the Rashbam, I can almost breeze through the Gemara. Whereas Rashi gives you what you need to be able to figure out the Gemara on your own, the Rashbam just tells you everything. And it's by the time you look at the Gemara, it's oh yeah, I know this already. And you just run through it. And also because he writes so much, the pages are small. So that's my initial reflections for anybody who is interested. But yeah, so it's very, very interesting. It's the Rashbam is almost overwhelming how much he writes. It's oh my gosh, is so much Rashbam to do. But he does a great job explaining. And then the Gemara is a breeze, and there's a lot less of it on each page. A lot more pages, though. Okay. So that was my little introduction into, or initial reflections on our new commentary for the next 5 months. All right. So we're going to start on Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis, about 4 lines from the bottom. Givaldig. So we're kind of in the middle. What are we in the middle of? We're in the middle of trying to figure out, how do we know that a chazaka is 3 years? How do we know that a chazaka is 3 years? So we had said, well, we learned it out from Shor Amud. Shor Amud, right? It's a short tam. After 3 times goring, becomes a Shor Amud. It's no longer a chazaka of a short tam, it's now a chazaka of a Shor Amud. So here oichit. After 3 years, it's no longer a chazaka that it's Shimon's field, the original owner's field. It's now a chazaka that it's Reuven's field, the new owner's field. Okay. But we asked the kasha. The kasha was that when it comes to Shor Amud, there's the opinion of Reb Meir, who says that technically you can become a Shor Amud in 1 day. If it gores 3 times in 1 day, it can already become a Shor Amud in 1 day. Reb Yehuda had said it has to gore on 3 separate days. Reb Meir says if it gores 3 times in 1 day, that's also a Shor Amud. So to apply that to chazaka, you could basically have a chazaka, you can condense the chazaka also. Maybe you could have a chazaka in less than 3 years. And we say, you know what, in fact, who's the one who's saying that we learn it out from Shor Amud? Rabbi Yishmael. And Rabbi Yishmael in our Mishnah, Taka, said that if you have a steya Elon, you could harvest figs, grapes, and olives, and that would already count as a chazaka. After that one harvest, you harvest 3 different trees, and you already have your chazaka. So Taka, Rabbi Yishmael says, so that's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, and Taka, yeah, you can sort of expedite the chazaka on the land. However, what would the rabbis say? And this is where our tale begins today. Right? What would the Chacham say? The Chacham don't agree with Rabbi Yishmael. The Chacham don't agree that you can harvest grapes, olives, and figs, and there's your chazaka. They don't agree with that. And therefore, they can't learn it out from Shor Amud, because then what do you do? How do you explain, right? What do you do with being able to condense, right? Rav Meir says that Shor Amud can become a Shor Amud even in 1 day. So how do you expedite a chazaka? So what's pshat with the rabbis? Where would the rabbis learn out the 3 years of a chazaka from, if not from Shor Amud? Okay, so 4 lines from the bottom of Chav Ches Amud Beis, the Rabbanon. So according to the Rabbanon, how do they learn out chazaka? Omer of Yosef, says of Yosef, Kroksiv. We have a pasuk in Jeremiah that says, Sodos ba'kesef yiknu v'chasov ba'sefer v'chasov. So Jeremiah says to the people in Eretz Yisrael, this was 10 years after the Golus Tzidkiyahu, and there was 2 more years until the Yidden were going to be exiled to Bavel. And Jeremiah gave the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael advice. He says, make sure that you write they have documentation, they have shtaris for your property here in Eretz Yisrael, so that when you come back, you'll be able to reclaim them. Now this was year 10. The next year already, they're going to be exiled. So there wasn't 3 years for a chazaka. There's only 2 years. And Jeremiah is saying, don't rely upon chazaka, because there is no chazaka. 2 years is not enough for a chazaka. Therefore, write documents, because that's how you're going to reclaim your fields. So Sodos ba'kesef yiknu v'chosu ba'sefer v'chosum shari novi omed be'eser. Jeremiah is speaking in the 10th year, umazir al chasesrei, and he's talking about how in the 11th year they're going to be 1 second. Right, I think 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think it's correct. So okay. And he's saying that look, in the next year, after 2 years, you're going to be exiled, and therefore you're not going to have a chazaka in 2 years, because it takes 3 years for a chazaka, and therefore make sure you have documentation, make sure you have shtaris to prove that you are the owner of your property. Okay, Abaye, but Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Dilma also made Tzitova Kamashmalon. Maybe don't be so medayik. Maybe don't read into that pasuk that, well, we're saying read a shtar because 2 years doesn't make a chazaka. You need 3 years for a chazaka, and you only have 2 years, therefore read a shtar. No, I can make the argument that, even 1 year could make a chazaka. The thing is, he was giving them advice. Don't rely on the chazaka. You're going to have to aid him, and it's going to be just, if you have a document on hand, it'll be more convenient than a chazaka. But it's not to say that even 1 year would not be a chazaka. He's not talking about chazakas. He's saying, he's giving them advice. The safest thing to do is to have a document. And if you don't say this, right, meaning Jeremiah is definitely giving advice. How do we know that he's definitely giving advice? Because Benubatim Vashevu, when Jeremiah advises the people in Bavel, hey, people, you're going to be there for a while until you're able to come back to Eretz Yisrael, so I advise, build houses, live in them, v'nituganos, v'chlas pirion, plant gardens, eat their fruits. You're not coming back to Eretz Yisrael so fast. So Micah Omar Leitzatova Kamashman, he's giving them advice. He's saying, look, the Yidden, Baruch Hashem, whatever, it's part of being a Yid. We have to adapt to whatever climate we're thrown into. And he says, look, you're in Bavel now, make the best of it. Build houses, gardens, and you're not coming back so quick. Don't complain, do whatever, just pick yourselves up and make a life for yourselves there. And he's giving them advice. And you should know that the pasuk says, right? Additionally, Jeremiah says that now you should take these documents and you should put it in an earthenware vessel so that they will be preserved for a long time, so you'll have them later on. What's the point of that? It's advice. He's giving them advice. It's not halachas about chazaka there. All right. Elo my Rave, rather says Rave, how do we know about chazakas? Because it's practical. Shato kamaisa, the first year, machil inish. Tati machil. Tlaslo machil. Here's the thing. Shimon is the owner of the field. Ruvain is the chazaker. The chazaker is the one who's making a chazaka on the field. Right? So Ruvain, it's not a technical term. Ruvain goes into Shimon's field, and for 1 year, he's working the field. For a second year, he's working the field. And we're saying, look, Shimon, he's more, okay, he's got this field. Ruvain's going into the field, is working the field. All right, 1 year, Shimon says, I don't really care. Second year, Shimon says, I don't really care. By the third year, Shimon already says, oh, 1 second, this is a problem. Reuven, you got to get out of here. From the fact that Shimon is allowing him to stay for 3 full years, he would not allow Reuven to stay unless it was in fact Reuven's, because by the third year he's not moichel anymore. Right? If it was not Reuven's, Reuven would be booted off by the third year. So that is pshat with a chazaka, that if Reuven has it for 3 years, then it must be his, because if it wasn't his, Shimon would have already booted him from the field. So again, so Elo Amar Rava, rather says Rava, Shata Kamaisa Mochil Inish. Okay, for 1 year, Shimon can say, you know what? It's okay, Reuven, it's yours. Tarte Mochil. And for the second year, Shimon will say the same thing. Reuven, work the field, it's fine, no problem. I'm Mochil. You can do what you want. But Tlas Lo Mochil. But by the third year, Shimon would not allow Reuven to just farm his field, or whatever the term is, to work his field, unless it was in fact Reuven's. Some of the Abai says to Rava, but Elamiyata, if you're saying that it's about being moichel, that Shimon, for the first 2 years, he says, all right, I don't care, you can use it, it's all yours. So kihadra ara tehadin levai mipere. Well, if that's the case, that Shimon is moichel for the first 2 years, well, then when Shimon eventually kicks him off of the field, so Reuven shouldn't have to give back the fruits. Because we're saying Shimon was moichel. He's saying, I don't really care. You can do whatever you want on the field. It's yours. Meaning, not actually yours, you don't own it, but I don't care. Do whatever you want on the field. We say for 2 years, he'll do that. But we say that if Shimon kicks Reuven, then after 2 years, he kicks Reuven off the field. So Reuven has to pay back Shimon for the fruits that, the fruits that he received. But Alama Amar of Nachman, why does Rav Nachman say, Hadra Arv Hadra Pere? Why does Rav Nachman say that Reuven has to give back the land to Shimon, of course, but also the fruits? But if Shimon was moichel on the fruits, why should Reuven have to give them back? Rather says Rave, Shato Kamaisa Lo Kapid Inish. Now, rather, for the first year, a person is not makpid, meaning he's not going to be all annoyed. The field belongs to Shimon. All of a sudden, Reuven's coming, and he's working Shimon's field. And Shimon's confused, and he's like, okay, I don't know why Reuven is working my field. I mean, it's not his field, it's my field. All the fruits are mine. I mean, I don't know why he's here, but if he's here, whatever, he's here. But Shimon is not moichel the fruits. He's saying, look, whatever, I don't care. Reuven's showing up in my field all of a sudden, he's working it. Okay, whatever, I'm not going to go crazy over here. Tartilo kapid, same thing the second year. Plus kapid, by the third year already, he says, get off my field. And therefore, if he doesn't say get off my field by the third year, then we can assume that it's in fact Reuven's. So Abaye says to Rove Elamiata, if it's all about a person being annoyed or not being annoyed, well then what about this, family of Bey Bar El Yoshev? The kapte that they were very makbid. Afilu aman decholef mitzvah didu. That, we've said I think this is what it's talking about, that we've said in the past that, right, that people would walk, that in between the fields, there would be some ground that was, I think, usually a little bit elevated or maybe undervated, like dug out. And people would walk there, and that was accepted. But this Bey Bar El Yoshev, they would not be into that. They were very, very particular. Well, if that's the case, I can imagine then that they would be very particular, and that if the Bey Bar El Yoshev would not allow Reuven to just plant their field. They would not be like, I don't care, let him do what he wants for 2 years. No way, no how. They wouldn't let him even for a second. And therefore, according to them, they would be makbid immediately. So therefore, so does that mean that if they're not makbid, then even right away, wow, they weren't makbid. It must be that it's really Reuven's, even right away, even before 3 years. Very quickly, it should be clear that it's Reuven's because the Bey Bar El Yoshev, they're not going crazy. And if you say, yeah, in that case, yeah, the chazaka would be shorter. But if that's the case, then you're making these halachas subjective. The Bey Bar El Yoshev, they're very makbid, so the chazaka there is immediate, but other people, the chazaka is longer. All of a sudden, chazaka is not an objective halacha, it becomes subjective, it depends on the person. Everybody's got their own share for a chazaka, it becomes a mess. Se'elo omar Rove. So rather, says Rove, here's how we understand chazaka. Shato kamaisa, we've seen this before. Mizdayer inish bishtore. Tarte vitlos mizdayer tvei lo mizdayer. Rava says, look, here's how chazaka works. The way that chazaka works is that if Reuven buys a field from Shimon and there's a document, so Reuven, for the first 3 years, the assumption is Reuven can be trusted, can be held responsible to safeguard the document. And if during that time Shimon says, "Hey, Reuven, what are you doing on my field?" Reuven needs to provide that document, right? The document of the sale in order to get Shimon to go away. Now the thing is, we can't, as I think we've gone to this, right? We can't expect Reuven, though, to hold on to the document forever. And if he loses his document in 50 years from now, Shimon's going to come and take his field away from him. Look at some, maybe there'll be a fire. Who knows what can happen? Unfortunately, so eventually there's kind of you pass sort of a certain threshold where we say, even if Reuven loses his document, he's been there long enough that we can ascertain that way that the field belongs to him, belongs to Reuven. Then we say, what's that cutoff? What's that point? 3 years. We say for 3 years, we say if Shimon comes and says, "Hey, this is my field, what are you doing here?" For 3 years, we say, Reuven, if you have the document, you can get Shimon to go away. If you don't have the document, you have to go away. After 3 years already, we say, look, something may have happened to the document, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Reuven's a thief. After 3 years, we say, look, if Shimon hasn't yet come for the first 3 years and told him, say, get off of my field, then we say, well, if for 3 years Reuven was on the field with no problems, with no troubles, so then we assume that it is Reuven's. Again, Shata Kamaisa Mizdar Inish Bishtari. For year 1, we can trust Reuven to safeguard his document. Tarte Vitlos Mizdar. And the same for the second year and the third year. Why is it so dark? don't know, what time is it? I don't know, 5:15? Usually this is when it's like super sunny. Tvei lo mizdar. But after 3 years already, Reuven might lose the document, and therefore it could still be his even without the document. We say, look, if he was there for 3 years and Shimon didn't make a peep for the first 3 years, so then we say, okay, it's Reuven's. Abaye says, Elameato. But if that's the case, macho shelo bifonov lo tehave macho. Okay, we saw this yesterday. So how did we just say that the chazaka works? The chazaka works because, well, for 3 years, Shimon didn't make a peep. For 3 years, Shimon left Reuven alone. And after that point, Reuven lost the document, but he's been there for 3 years. Shimon never gave him a hard time. So we say that it's Reuven's. But if within the 3 years, Shimon does give him a hard time, and Shimon says, hey, what are you doing here? Well, not only does he have to provide the document during the 3 years to prove it, but at that point also, the chazaka goes away. Right? The chazaka is based on the fact that for 3 years, Shimon never gave him a hard time. But if during the 3 years, Shimon does give him a hard time, well, then the chazaka doesn't work anymore. The chazaka requires that for 3 years, Shimon never gave him a hard time. I was thinking yesterday that there's like 3 parts of a chazaka. One is that it has to be 3 years. One is that Shimon has to not give him a hard time. What's the third one? I don't know. I was thinking yesterday there was like 3 parts of it. I'm probably just forgetting it. But anyway, what I was thinking yesterday. But anyways, if Shimon does give him a hard time during those 3 years, well then there's no longer chazaka. Chazaka requires that for 3 years Shimon didn't give him a hard time. If Shimon gives him a hard time, well then there's no chazaka anymore. So now, we say that for Shimon to give him a hard time, he just has to say in front of witnesses, this guy Reuven, he's a thief. Right? Shimon says, look, this field is my field. I don't know what Reuven's doing here. He's a thief. He just has to say it in front of witnesses, not necessarily in front of Reuven, just in front of witnesses. So now Abaye asks Rava, right? Abaye says to Rava, Elameato. But if that's the case, that the way the chazaka works is that Reuven has to know, meaning, right, is that, well, for 3 years Shimon never made a peep. And eventually, Reuven stopped, being super careful about the document, and the document maybe got misplaced, but he's been there for 3 years with no problems. But if Shimon does make a peep, well then the chazaka goes away, and Reuven has to therefore be concerned, has to hold on to the document even longer until they settle the dispute. So if that's the case, that Reuven's going to have to know that Shimon is giving him a hard time so that he can hold on to safeguard the document properly. Well, shouldn't we need Shimon to make a whole fuss in Reuven's presence so that Reuven knows, wait, I better hold on to this document? Why is it acceptable for Shimon to be mocha in front of witnesses in some other place? How is Reuven going to know? The Amalek is, after all, shouldn't Reuven be able to say to Shimon, if you would have been mocha in front of me, I would have said, oh wow, 1 second, this guy's a real piece of work. I better hold on to my document until we get this settled. But because you were mocha not in front of me, I didn't know. Well, the Amalek, because Shimon says to Reuven, as we saw yesterday, chavra islay, v'chavra dechavra chavra islay. Look, the Entis in the Bungalow Khan in Shabbos afternoon, people find things out, and, if, word spreads, if I was mocha in front of witnesses, word is going to get around, and it's going to get back to Reuven, because my witnesses have friends, and your friends have friends, and my witnesses have your friends, and, word is going to get back to you, and therefore, Shimon doesn't have to be mocha in front of Reuven, he just has to be mocha in front of witnesses, and we can assume that word got back to Reuven. Shimon has to be mocha in front of witnesses, we can assume that word got back to Reuven, and therefore, if for Reuven to say, well, I lost the document, and it's now 3 years later, and I didn't know that he was mocha, no, you can't say I didn't know. The assumption is that if he was mocha in front of witnesses, Reuven eventually found out, and he should have been careful to hold on to his document even more than 3 years until this dispute is resolved. So be'etzem, that is the Chacham's opinion. How do the Chazaka is 3 years? It's essentially a svara that for 3 years a person will hold on to a document after 3 years. If Shimon hasn't given him a hard time, the document can get misplaced eventually. But we say, well, if he was there for 3 years though, with no hard time, so then we can assume that he is the owner. Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Shalosh shanim she'amru hu she'acholon ritzufis. Says Rav Huna that when we say 3 years, it's 3 years straight. So when we say, for example, cheskas habatim, that to make a chazak on a house, it's 3 years, it means 36 years straight, not 12 months here, 12 months there. No, it's 36 months, 1 through 36 straight. So again, Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Huna shalosh shanim she'amru, when they say 3 years, hu she'acholon ritzufis, it's 36 months in a row. My kamashman tanina. What? Okay, why do we need Rav Huna? Our Mishnah says, chezkosin shalosh shanim miyom liyom, that the chazaka is 3 years from day to day, 36 months. So ma'odetema, I may have thought, no, you know what that means? Miyom liyom la'afukim mikutos. Right, we said that by a stebes haba'al that receives rainwater. So we had said that according to Rabbi Yishmael, 18 months can do it. According to Rabbi Akiva, 14 months can do it. So maybe I need Rav Huna, because if I only had the Mishnah, I might think that maybe 3 years could be less than 36 months. Kind of like we've seen other opinions, 18 months, 14 months. So I might think, so therefore from the Mishnah, it says, shalosh shanim miyom liyom, is to say, no, it can't be 18 months, it can't be 14 months, it has to be 36 months. But maybe those 36 months can be scattered, 12 months here, 12 months there, another 12 months, it can be broken up. So Kamash Milan, so therefore we need Rav Huna to tell us that the 36 months is not just 36 months scattered around. It's 36 months in a row. Amar Rav Chama, says Rav Chama umodi Rav Huna, that Rav Huna admits though be'asrei demuvrei bage, that if it's so let's say it's a field, okay, and let's say it's a place where what they do is they plant the field 1 year and then they just leave it fallow the next year. Then they plant 1 year and leave it fallow the next year. So in that scenario, you wouldn't have to have 3 years straight, because in that place they don't plant they don't work the field 3 years straight. They do it every other year. So in that case, the chazaka would be kind of broken up. It'd be 3 years of working the land. Pshita, isn't that obvious? If that's the minig, that's the minig. Well, no, actually, it's talking about a scenario where some people work the field. Some people work the field straight, 1 year after the next. But some people do this kind of fallow play. So, Vaygaver Movra. And this is what this guy did, right? Ruvain, he planted it 1 year, left it fallow the next year, like those people who did that. I may have thought, Omarle, that Shimon can say to Ruvain, Im Isa de Dido Chavoy, if it's true that this is your field, Ibarilach Lemizra, then you should have planted it each year. So Kamashmalan de Omarle. So what it's teaching is that Ruvain could say to Shimon, no. Chada, firstly, Arab B'chule Baiga Lo Matzina Linter. First of all, the fields surrounding my fields, they all leave their fields fallow every other year. And therefore, for me to plant my field while all the surrounding fields are fallow means that I would have to find somebody to guard my field alone. There's nobody else to share that expense with me. I would have to find a guard to guard just my field, and that's not practical. So therefore, so Reuben says to Shimon, look, all the other fields surrounding me are also leaving theirs fallow, so it's not practical for me to plant mine, because how am I going to guard it? V'inami, alternatively, additionally, look, this is my field, and I would prefer to leave it fallow every other year so that the years that I plant it, I get a much better yield. So therefore, we're saying that Reuven would be entitled to leave his field fallow every other year in that case. Tanan, we learn in our Mishnah. Chezkas habatim. So we said in our Mishnah, Chezkas habatim, right? Making a chazaka on a house. Okay. V'abatim de biyamama yade belel lo yade. But a house is something, people could, you can make a chazaka, people can, you can find witnesses that you were in the house during the day, but the witnesses don't know that you're there at night. How are they supposed to know? So right? So meaning the point is, so you can't really have witnesses about a chazaka of 36 months straight. You can only have 36 days. Nobody could tell you about what's going on at night. Abai says, Abai man masid abatim. Who's going to be the witnesses on the houses? Shiviv. The neighbors are going to be the ones to testify. Oh yeah, he's our neighbor. We saw him here for 36 months. Shivive meida yade b'imama v'lelia. Neighbors know. For example, I hear my next door neighbor yelling at the people in the park all night. Well, not all night because I sleep part of the night, but I wake up in the middle of the night and she's yelling at them. So I know that she's here at night. So the neighbors know about the days and the night. So therefore, it is 36 months straight, day and night. Rave Omar. Rave says, you know how witnesses can know that Reuven was there day and night? Because you know who these witnesses are? The asu beit trei ve'amru anon agrinon mine v'darinon beit tlashnin b'imamo v'lelia. Rava says, you know who these witnesses are that are testifying about that Reuven had as a chazaka a day and night? Reuven rented out the house to two renters. And those renters are coming and say, look, we rented it for 3 years, day and night. Shimon never knocked on our door. Nobody gave us a hard time. So there you go. They're testifying that it was Reuven's for 3 years and nobody gave a hard time. Where am I? Omar le Rav Yemer le Rav Ashi. So Rav Yemer says to Rav Ashi, Hani noigen beidusonei. Oh, Rav Yemer asked a gewaltige kasha to Rav Ashi. He says, 1 second. Once, are you crazy? How can we trust these renters? They're untrustworthy witnesses. They're nogeya be'edus, and they have incentive to give their testimony. What's the incentive to give their testimony and to testify that their landlord owns the property that they were renting and paying rent to? I mean, the answer should be obvious. The ilo amriach, if they don't say like this, if they don't say, oh yeah, we were there for 3 years and nobody gave us a hard time, well, guess what? Shimon, if they can't establish the chazakah, Shimon's going to take it away. And guess what happens when Shimon takes it away? He says, alright, so, y'all were renting for 3 years? Alright, I'd like to collect rent for 3 years. So, Amrinalu, Zilu Avule Agar Beisa Lahai. If it turns out that there was no chazakah, then they're going to have to double pay rent. They're going to have to pay rent nachamol to Shimon. So, of course, they're going to come and say, oh yeah, we lived there for 3 years. Reuven was our landlord. We lived there for 3 years. Shimon never came. Of course they're going to say that. Because otherwise, if it turns out that it's Shimon's going to ask them to pay him rent. So Amar Le, so Rav Ashi says to Rav Yemer, Daine de shvile achida ine. 1 second, no. Only foolish judges would accept the testimony of the renters in the scenario that you described, that they already paid rent, and that if it turns out there's no chazakah, they're going to have to pay again to Shimon. Yeah, obviously you're right. They're nogeya be'edus. No competent judge would accept their testimony in that case. But milo askinun kigon denikite agar beisa ve'amri leman leisva. It's talking about a situation where the renters have not yet paid rent. And they have rent, 3 years worth of rent. And they say, okay, who does this go to? Does it go to Reuven? Does it go to Shimon? And they say, look, well, makes no difference who we pay, but I'll tell you this. We rented this apartment, we rented this house for 3 years. Shimon, day and night, Shimon never came. So then we can trust them, right? It doesn't matter if they pay Reuven or Shimon, right? And yet they're saying that they can attest that they rented the house from Reuven, and Shimon never gave them a hard time. So therefore, we can rely upon their testimony about the chazak on the house. Omar Marzutra says Marzutra, V'itoin ve'omar leisu trei saide lasude le didarbe tlos shnei b'imamu v'lelia ta'anose tainu. Says Marzutra that by default, if witnesses come and say that Reuven was in the house for 36 months, for 3 years, so we can trust them, right? That Reuven was in the house for 3 years, and we assume that their testimony would apply for day and night by default. They wouldn't have to testify specifically about day and night by default. It would be enough to say that we're testifying that Reuven lived there for 3 years. But if Shimon were to say, "Wait, I don't accept that. I want testimony that Reuven was there day and night," because I went there a bunch of times during the night and I didn't see him. If I would have seen him, then I would have said something. But I went by the property a bunch of times at night. I never saw anybody there. There was nothing there to make me think, wow, maybe somebody's living in my house. So if Shimon says, look, I need testimony that he was there, in fact, at night, because, I'm not aware that he was there at night, and that's why I never said anything. So if that's the claim that he makes, it's a legitimate claim. Right? Omar Mazutra says, Mazutra v'itoin v'omar, that if Shimon makes the claim and he says, Leisu trei saide lasude, I want you to bring 2 witnesses to testify, lasude le, the darbe tloshnei, that he was there for 3 years, b'yemama uvelelia, during the day as well as during the night, Tanos Tana, it's a valid taina, and they would have to bring witnesses for the day and the night. Umodi Marzutra admits that while we said that when the witnesses say that Reuven, by default, when the witnesses say that Reuven was there for 3 years, it means day and night. Birochlin amachzirin ba'ayoros. No, I'm sorry. Marzutra just said, yes, by default, we would say that the testimony is day and night. But, yes, by default, the testimony is for day and the night because we don't make the claim for Shimon that, hey, you have to bring witnesses about the night as well. If Shimon says, hey, I want you to bring witnesses that Reuven was there not just during the day but at night too, we say, okay, that's legitimate, he's entitled to, and then you would have to bring witnesses for the nighttime. But by default, we wouldn't make that claim for Shimon. And by default, witnesses who said that Reuven was there for 3 years, it means 3 years, day and night, unless Shimon himself asks to bring, right, that Reuven should bring witnesses for the nighttime as well. But otherwise, Bezdin wouldn't make the taina for Shimon. However, Marzutra admits, Birochlin amachzirin ba'ayoris, by, spice merchants, perfume merchants, who go around to the different cities in order to sell their perfumes, and they're often away for a long time. Right? They're not around. They don't know what's going on necessarily. If Reuven came to his property while he was out, making a living for weeks at a time, or even months at a time, he doesn't know that Reuven's there. So in that case, Bezdin would make the taina for this merchant to say, wait, Reuven, this is somebody who's generally away. There's no way for him to know that that somebody's living in his house at the time. So therefore, then we would say you have to bring witness. Bezdin would say for the merchant that Reuven needs to bring witnesses that he was there the whole time. Right? Modern Marzutra proclaim machzim bayoris davagav deloton taninon lei onon. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That he would have to, right, because otherwise, Shimon's right. Shimon's saying, Shimon the merchant saying, I had no clue that this person was here. I didn't know that I should have to be moche. I didn't even know he was there. So Bezdin is going to say, on Shimon's behalf, Reuven, you need to bring witnesses that you were there for 3 years, not just during the day, but also at night. To Mother of Huna, and Rav Huna, who says that you need 36, 3 years straight, he admits, B'chenvasa de Machoza, in the storefronts in Machoza, Diliyamama Avida, Leleya Lo Avida, those storefronts are only used during the day, and therefore, it can only be expected that witnesses are provided that Reuven was there during the day. There's no expectation that he was supposed to be there at night, so he wouldn't have to bring witnesses for the night. Okay, and now where are we? Rami bar Chome v'Avukva bar Chome zavunai amsa b'adei adodi. Rami bar Choma and Ravukva bar Choma, they purchased a maidservant together. Okay, they purchased a maidservant from Shimon, okay, from the original owner, and she was going to work for them. Okay, so Rami bar Choma Ravukva bar Choma zavunai amsa b'adei adodi. They bought an amma that they were going to split between the two of them. Marish damish barishona shlishis v'chamishes. And one of them, she was going to work for one of them on years 1, 3, and 5. And she would work for the other one, years 2, 4, and 6. So for neither one of them was she working for 3 years straight. Okay? So Nafik ilava. And then, sure enough, Shimon says, the original owner says, I don't know what these people are doing with my maidservant. It's mine. She's mine. So the Kamid Rav, they came before Rav, and I guess that this is 3 years in. Now, during those 3 years, neither one of them, she wasn't working for one of them for 3 years exclusively. She worked for one of them for 1 year, and then she switched to the other one, then back to the other one. But there was no chazaka with one of them. So the Kamid Rav, they came before Rav Amrlu, and Rav said to them, look, my time abdisu achi, how come you switched off years? You put this plan together so that neither one of you should be able to have a chazaka, and I guess the point is, meaning, right, neither one of them should be able to say, well, the chazaka is that she's mine, and now you can't have her. So they worked it out. Look, I'll have it 1 year, you have the other. Neither one of us will be able to establish a chazaka to hold it against the other one. Okay, so you put together this mahalach, so that built built into the process, neither one will be able to establish a chazaka. So and the interesting sort of side consequence of that is that, well, just like it's not a chazaka for either of you to hold against the other, well, guess what? La'amanami la'ave chazaka. Well, guess what? You also don't have a chazaka, and if Shimon is coming and saying, hey, what are you guys doing with my maidservant? You don't have a chazaka, because neither one had it for 3 years. But that's only if there was no document that spelled out this arrangement. But if they had a document that explained that that they purchased this amma and they were going to switch off, this one gets it this year, that one the next year, well then it has a kala, it has a voice, and it can be expected that it belongs to them, and this is just the arrangement that they have with each other, but it belongs to them. Omar Rove, says Rove, Achla Kula Chutz Mi Beis Rova. Says Rove that, okay, so if Reuven was on this field, all right, and he, I guess, was farming the whole field, except for, I don't know, a base rova. What's that? Like a quarter of a, I don't know, kav or something. I don't know. The rova? I don't know. There was a certain amount of it that he did not farm. So kanakula chutz mi base rova. So Rava says, all right, well, there's a chazaka on the parts that he was working, the parts that he was farming. The parts that he didn't farm, he doesn't have a chazaka on those, and he doesn't own them. Afuna Beit of Yeshua says, Afuna Beit of Yeshua v'lamar and Ella, Debar Zriyahi. It says Afuna Beit of Yeshua, that's so long as this land was able to be farmed. But if it was like rocky or something, whatever it was, like if it wasn't arable, is that a word? Arable? Dennis, what's it called when you can like farm land? Arable? 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 if it's not that, so then whatever, you couldn't work it. So, what do you want? So it's his anyways. Yeah, he has a chazaka on it because he has a chazaka on the rest of it. So Avala Barzir, he koni lo. Agavara. So then it belongs to him just like the rest of it belongs to him. Maski flora beva barabai asakasha lemiato. Sunma bane yikne. What if you have a rocky, I think it means rocky, if you have like a rocky field, a field that is not arable? So I'm just going to assume that it's arable so that I can use the word. So if you have a field that's not arable, so how do you make a chazaka on it? It's impossible, right? Rav Yeshua is saying, well, if the land wasn't arable, well, what can you do? Malasot, you can't work it, but you work the rest of the field, so you own that, so you own this too. But then what do you do with a field that just by definition is not arable? So is there no way to make a chazaka? What you do with non-arable land is that you bring animals there. You can put animals there. You can lay out fruit there. There's non-farming things that you can use to make a chazaka on non-arable land. So if he worked most of the land, but part of it is non-arable, so do other things there. Bring fruits there, bring animals there, so you can't just make an excuse like, well, it's non-arable. There's other things you could do on non-arable lands. Chevre, that was daf Chof Tes of Masechta BavaBasra. It was the first daf with the Rashbam. It wasn't actually a particularly short daf, but I think the dafs they are going to be getting short. I guess we'll have to see. But I think they are going to be, just like in terms of time length. But this was the first daf with the Rashbam. Very interesting. And we learned about what's pshat with the chazaka, where does it come from? Because, a person, how long can we expect him to hold on to a document so long as there hasn't been any macha or anything? And we saw the opinion of Avuna, says that's to be 36 months straight. And all right, peace out.